this new time. Hopefully it's an appropriate time. I mean, I would assume it is for those who are here and those who are not, maybe not so much. But we're not, I'm not for sure having this at this time indefinitely, but we'll see how it goes. And we may do some multiple times. Yeah, because we're, there's so many people. Maybe say where you're from in the chat, because people are coming from pretty much all over the place. And usually in our afternoon groups, we have a lot of people from Europe. The non-dual crowd from Europe is very strong. But yeah, so we're here. I hope everyone's doing well. Maybe say, I don't know, share a few words if you are here and would like to share in the chat. If there's any questions or comments or topics that want to be explored right off the bat, feel free. We're going to dive into a practice as we usually do. And, the whole thing is a practice, really, even the message, whatever we're here to talk about. It's my really only time in the week that I, other than obviously, one-on-ones I'm doing quite often. It's my only main teaching element right now in group format. So sometimes, I have things to share, as we generally know, on Wednesdays. But as of late, I've been quite a lot more bit quiet, focusing on a lot more music and creative elements, and a lot of building happening right now in terms of community and things up here in Ottawa, and physical events and things starting to happen and get a bit more. But a lot of things in the air as well. I made a joke in my stories about some trending topics, right, that we could address or talk about. I didn't really have any particular in mind, but I do know just from my observations in the collective space that there's quite a few, charged topics in the air that are happening collectively, whether it's the economy or these hurricanes or the ongoing, conflicts in Europe, but also now in Iran. We have some pretty nasty topics really happening all at the same time. And so if anyone was waiting for, some signpost of what a lot of biblical, biblical scriptures talk about as the end times, or these times of transition, or all of this, and they name off all of these things that are to happen, whether it's natural disasters or world revolutions or wars and famine, or great upheaval in structures, in the systems of various structures. Well, I don't know what we'd be waiting for, because surely over not only just this past, immediate time frame, but over the past few years, even, we've been having quite a few strongly held topics. And this brings me to kind of an interesting point in terms of all that, in specifically in regards to what is our individual relationship to these wider topics, or these grand scenarios that we may often primarily conjure up within the context of our own mind, of our own fantasies and imagination, and our own fears, and the projection of those fears that are shared among more than just you, like we talked about, like a biblical representation within a religious culture, or within a societal structure, or within a community. Like we have this conspiracy community, we have the woke community, the awakening, these different kind of various groupings where shared projections or shared ideals, shared fantasies, shared imaginations, shared feeling senses, like a sense that certain timelines or certain unfoldings may occur. They're all kind of interplaying in all of these very interesting ways. And so it's very important that we come to ground into a clarity as to what's our personal relationship with these ideas, concepts, and primarily when we come back to it all, as we've done endlessly in these sessions, is the sensational reality of these ideas. Because again, no matter what it is that we're perceiving, no matter what it is that we're observing, there is naturally a sensation associated with that. right? There is some form of sensation with that that may be triggered and may arise somewhere within the field. So the question lies, well, um, well, how does that feel, really? Like this is really as simple as it gets. Do we feel at ease or at peace with what's arising? Not saying that everything is just always in a neutral, like a constant neutral, but saying that even amongst the energy that we feel within all of this, even the fact that we can go on the news or talk to a friend or observe the harsh realities of all of what is present, we still can rest within a certain equanimity and balance and gracefulness and ease and peacefulness within it all. And this also can become another fantasy, another ideal, right? Another imagining that we feel like we need to match or meet. But I want to point at it in a very, very practical way, like in the most self-honest way. How are we feeling? Like what is our relationship and our personal navigation within the variety of these times, the variety of these happenings, the variety of the chaos and the ease and all of the above. Because when we're not keeping focused with our personal relation, or like the most intimate of our own experience, and we start getting lost within the kind of highways of thought forms, it's like these highways of consciousness or trends, kind of we view them as like I'm viewing them right now as like highways, these trends that are going right, and they're carrying this charged energy. Like the fuel of these trends are often fueled by emotion and emotional energy. And so moving in all these directions, if we're not clear about what is really just our own, like what is really what do these highways actually have to do with us? Like, do we really need to take these highways? Is that actually for us or not, right? Is that the direction we're wanting to go? This is quite important, as an overall consideration, because when we start to notice that we're on highways, or we're on trajectories, or we're walking in directions to places we don't even really want to go, or we're not even really actually looking to be involved in. This is a very revealing and beautiful process, because it's a humbling to and it's a humbling, and it's a process of self-honesty. What is this actually? What is the true desire here actually? That's a primary look at the dynamic of what we're facing now, because like I said, if we were waiting for any period or any end time signal, or or a new world signal, which is maybe a more positive outlook, we could potentially come to see that, well, actually we're right in the midst of all of it. We're right in the midst of the entirety of all of this, all of the projections that have come. And what's important in acknowledging that, and the main core reason why I'm bringing this up, is because the projections of tomorrow are forever going to be the attempt of the lower mind to be the way that we're going to find ease, right? So it's like, if I have hope for tomorrow, or if I have or on the other end, if I'm fearful of tomorrow, it gives me something to pay attention to other than what's right here. So there could be something very clearly right before you, something very obviously right before you that is calling for attention. That could be a feeling sense, that could be an intuition, that could be a relationship, that could be any sort of dynamic. But the hopes and dreams, or the fears and the projections of tomorrow, are often what can get in the way of that and create some sort of false draw, false pull to the imagined land of what can occur, or what may potentially occur, in both a positive sense or a quote unquote negative sense. Both, they will generally come in either of those dualities, right? So this comes in the form of, we have this new earth, this new world we're stepping into, like a 5D, you know, all of this kind of idea, this new world, new earth, new whatever. That's one side of the conversation. Another side is there's going to be an economic collapse, or there's going to be a great disasters, and you know, there's going to be food shortages. There's going to be World War III is going to, like, there's an endless list of things, both on the macro scale and in the micro of our own life experience. Because if we find ourselves getting into the energies on the macro scale and really playing into those two apparent dualities, like this huge new earth projection, or the projection of some catastrophe, usually they come together. We generally can come back into our own individual life and see the most of micro ways in which the mind presents this in the hopes and dreams and fears of our individual moment-to-moment, day-to-day life experience. Like something, we have to have a conversation with someone, and we're nervous about it, so we're creating these ideas as to what it's going to look like. Or maybe we have this this project, or this specific thing that we're focused on, and we think it's going to be everything. We feel like it's going to bring all of this, insert whatever it's going to bring, and we're holding equally to that. Both of those create a form of entrapment, some level of entrapment, and the entrapment is in some timeline or some reality or some concept, some idea that doesn't actually exist in reality. It's not actually there. And this isn't to say that we cannot entertain the natural insights and messages or visions or what have you we get of a future or a past, or interchangeable on some level when we really start to understand time. It's not to say that we cannot explore that. It's that we're really starting to look at the principle or the perspective of engaged attachment. What does engaged attachment look like in a lived experience, in the way that we can be invested and interested in unfoldings of our life experience, and what could potentially happen, or what could potentially look of our life in a certain way. It's all practical, and simultaneously so completely detached from how that is to happen, because we know, well, really at the core we know nothing. Like we are humble, but yet we are knowing at the same time. So we have a knowing of things, but we're humble to what we also do not know, which is quite vast. And if you think about it, it's eternal what we do not know, because it's eternal what we could potentially come into knowing with. So it's a constant humbling game of recognizing that we really actually don't know how things are going to play out. And the only real way we can possibly know is to participate in the unfolding of it. Right? Like, what would be more practical and logical to understand life than to just live the life experience? So what does this look like in a practical sense? Well, it very specifically relates and connects into the topic of desire. Many spiritual teachings will point to the epitome of spiritual teachings and the essence of it as the desireless, coming to the desireless state. Peace is when you're desireless, essentially. But this is true, and simultaneously true that the engagement of desire is the way in which any sort of arrival or any sort of realization of desirelessness will be possible. Right? This is the nature of the paradoxical dynamic of this path, is that in the engagement of desire, right, the honest engagement of desire. So if we have a desire for something that arises in the body, a sensation, we can simultaneously recognize that, through our practice almost instantly, the investigation of the desire will reveal its emptiness. It will reveal that this desire is actually not how it appears to be. And so as we get more adept in our ongoing practice of investigation and inquiry, not just with eyes closed, but through the living of this investigation, where everything is engaged intimately, within this, whatever this is, not inside or outside or even a middle, but whatever this is. That engagement, that investigation reveals again and again and again and again and again and again that this desire is actually empty. Desire is actually empty. Desire is actually empty. But it's empty of the ideas you have about it, not of the substance of true love or true fulfillment or true peace, or what is essentially all desire pointing to, which is that divine love of source, or that true peace. These are not things that really actually can grasp it, but they're words at least that represent it for us. So on some level, the emptying is not actually an emptying where there's nothing, like, oh, I have no desires, I just sit all day and do absolutely nothing and nothing happens. On some level, this can be true when you look at it from one angle. On another angle, we understand that desire is actually the perpetual movement of co-creation. It's the endless constant that is, what all Buddhist traditions would point to, which is, the universe or the cosmic creation is in perpetual change. Perpetual change means desire. It means desire is perpetually moving, perpetually unfolding, revealing itself, co-creating with itself. So desire is extremely important, and cannot be resisted, cannot be pushed away. I mean, every time we have attempted to do so, it will come. It's like sweeping under the rug. It's just going to come out the other side. Right? The nature of the process, as we've investigated many times before, and we're doing now, and we'll continue to do, is a recognition that all desire is a sensation, all fear is a sensation, and they're intertwinably linked. They only appear differently because of the strong identification we have with all essentially that is not us, all that we think is us and we believe is us, that may not actually be. And so the more we're identified with things, the more the apparent difference of fear and desire is so. And that's what I was getting to in terms of the new earth vision. If you have a very intensive, extremely strong attachment to some new world that's coming for you, almost instantly or simultaneously, you will eventually inevitably recognize that you also have, the epitome of the apocalypse dream as well, because they're not separate. They're two sides of the same coin. So as we come back into the reality of things, where we recognize that all desire, all fear, it's really the same, is a sensation, and these sensations happen in different places in the body, in different places in our anatomy, in our template. And through the investigation of them, a reminder here, investigation is not just a sitting with the eyes closed and focusing on it like we do almost all the time. It's equally a engagement in life. So this is the other point I was getting to earlier. It's a living of life. All right. And so this seems so simple and so straightforward and obvious. But it's very easily forgotten that we can actually just live our life experience exactly as it's appearing, changing nothing essentially about it. Like for instance, what I specifically mean here is not necessarily making it any more spiritual than it is. If you get what I mean, as I'm sure we can all relate, it's like, oh, my normal life is not spiritual enough. So I need to replace all of these things with spiritual things. And that is somehow going to bring me to this reality, this, again, the fanciful, idealized, imagined reality of, the new earth, the new paradigm, the arrival to some magical land. When in fact, the nature of authentic investigation and, some of the most advanced spiritual processes is actually to come to investigate and directly live what is arising as a desire within our life experience, meaning a movement, like I got to do this today, I'm going to talk to this person, I'm going to gauge this, I'm going to look at this, I'm going to sense this, I'm going to feel this, exactly as it is appearing without needing to change at all, actually engaging it fully. And fully is I don't like to use that term completely, because like fully, completely, totally, like that kind of thing, because this is so arbitrary. But I feel we can get the drift here, that we're engaging what's arising as it's arising with a willingness, an embracing, an authenticity, a self-honesty, an awareness, an integrity, compassion, patience, right? A respect, a humility, you see, when the principles of all these things are lined up, like when we have all these principles involved with desire, the room for error, right, or the fear of desire becomes no longer. You see, how transformative is this? To understand that by developing the proper foundation of the principles of our behavior, right, alignment in righteous action, righteous way, the middle way, because that's where it's all found, we can engage desire without the fear that desire is the culprit, or what is arising as a desire within me is somehow wrong or not correct or not it, not spiritual. And then thus the eternal judgments and layers of conditioning and guilt and shaming and all that comes on top of it, which is not necessarily something that's coming on top of it. It's something that's revealing itself within this entirety of the process of essentially denying creative force, denying sexual energy, denying desire, denying all of that because of a distortion or a misalignment with what it actually is. So it's all very intertwined and interwoven with some core things. And one of the core things that I'm alluding to here that we have touched on before, and I may bring up just a little picture because it'll help, and most of you have maybe seen this before, but is of the Kalantic virtues, right? The Christic virtues, which many traditions have presented the virtues in various fashions over the many years of endless eternal teachings. But in my view, the Kalanic virtues really does represent much of what we're talking about here, and I have ongoingly pointed to them, and I feel like it is coming up a time where we will do a masterclass specifically on them. Obviously, the actual workshops from Kalanic tradition are going to do them far better justice than what I can bring, but I have worked with them for quite a number of years now in very specific ways that aren't covered in the exact way that they are in the workshop. So that may be of benefit. So if that's of interest, then we can talk about this shortly. But I want to just share my screen here and just remind us what this looks like, right? So when we look at the virtues, we're looking at the 13 virtues, which are the Mahayana wheel or shield, part of the shield of Kale, which is essentially a framework. So when we look at the anatomy of ourselves, like our physical body, our organ structure, our nervous system, our chakras, all of it, we can start to actually look at something like this, even though this isn't the exact code. So you'd have to look at the exact codes, the original codes. But these codes are like the mathematical encryptions that are literally a part of our anatomy, just like our finger is. So when we look at an anatomy chart and we say, oh yeah, I have that finger, I have that heart, I have that lung, that's what's inside me. Well, when we look at this, we're actually looking at the same thing. It's just a more subtle aspect to our energetic structure. So when we say, okay, Teja Ru, which is the root, or it's associated with the root chakra, but it is the first virtue of effective action, which is a combination of strength, balance, poise, timing. How is our action in the world? Our engagement within the physical dimension one, D1, Teja Ru. Well, we would come to see that, well, this encryption, this coding is actually a part of my template and anatomy. So for one, if I didn't know that, now I do, right? Like for instance, if I didn't know I had a hand and then someone showed me I had a hand, boy, how much would that change my experience? Right? Like how much would that completely shift things in our life experience if we were walking around our life, our whole life, and we didn't even know we had hands, even though we were using them all day. But we didn't acknowledge the fact that we had hands. And then all of a sudden we learned, oh, I have hands. Wow. It's wild, right? So we go through each of them and we understand that each of them, love, intimacy, eternal nature, community, prosperity, communication, power, camaraderie, intimacy, passion, freedom, enlightenment, each of them have a certain encryption, and they have a placeholder within our energetic anatomy. And when we're misaligned, and I have very specific exercises on this process that I've done myself, similar to the journaling stuff we've done in the past, where we're engaging each of these virtues through our journaling, through our self-reflection, and we're being very honest. how are we actually lining up with these sub qualities, right? Like you could literally just meditate on the main word and you're going to reveal it, like with the code and the tone, it'll reveal itself. But sometimes we like the intellectual process of understanding, oh yeah, when I look at love and I understand purity and compassion and kindness and clarity, that gives me a more visceral understanding, at least mentally, which can help. Right. But essentially matching ourselves up to these and seeing how are we conducting ourselves in alignment with the entirety of this wheel. And so, this doesn't necessarily have to be done with this wheel in particular. I'm sharing it because it's been very helpful for myself, and it is a fundamental fabric, of our blueprint. But a lot of the other religious, traditions and various systems have very much outlined the breakdowns of what is, ethical morality, what is the righteous way. And it's not just like a layer of commandments. It's not like, oh, do this and don't do that. And this is why I like the virtues particularly, because it doesn't really point to that. It points to, although there are the attitudes of mastery and responsibility, that's another handbook that I've shared with people. Those are way more specific in terms of a bit more of okay, this is how we uphold ourselves, right? But when we're working with the encodings of things, it's much more indirect, in the sense that we have to be the ones to really be honest and uncover within our own being and bring honesty to our behaviors in particular ways, and how those particular ways may or may not be creating and contributing to suffering. And particularly in relation to what we were speaking about today, our relationship with desire, creative force, sexual energy, all intertwined, right? All very much the same thing. So it all brings a much more foundational look into it all, because if we're in alignment with our naturally expressed virtues, right, where we feel like this wheel is an embodiment within our being, and we're feeling this essence, when we tune to that sense of compassion and integrity and patience and respect and honor and courage and all these types of terms that hold an encryption, we can see that as that is in balance, naturally our relationship with the desire and the desires that arise within us are also going to be balanced. So that is going to inevitably support in the dissolution of the self-doubt and the guilting and the shaming and all of these things, because we have to be very clear with the fact that although guilt and shame often can arise through an accumulation of energy over a course of time that has been unprocessed, right? Like an unprocessed trauma, an unprocessed energy that has been stagnant, and creates situations to feel more guilty about things by doing things unrighteously. But at the core, the root is essentially, it's a self-created situation to perpetuate the same cycle. And with that said, it's kind of like a chicken before the egg thing, because guilt and shame are guidance tools, right? Like if we walk outside and punch someone in the face, we're going to feel a natural sense of guilt, depending the situation, but we're going to generally feel a natural sense of guilt, because it's a guidance tool that says that was incorrect or misaligned with the natural way, the middle way. So it's a beautiful thing. So when people get all caught up in guilt and shame, there's no issue with guilt and shame as an emotion. It's very useful, just like any emotion. It's just that when it's unnecessary, right? Or when it's creating an extreme reaction to a happening. Like for instance, okay, we've done wrong, we acknowledge the wrong, we correct the wrong, and we navigate a new direction. So that would be a healthy sense of a guidance system of guilt, or our guidance system that says what is true. But if we're ridden with traumas and energies that are stuck within the being and the body, naturally, then that process is not so cut and dry. It's going to be, I've wronged myself, I've wronged this person, I'm so bad, why am I so bad? Someone needs to tell me I'm good. And then you run around trying to look for someone to tell you you're good. And that's an endless search. And that's often what much of the spiritual journey is. Everyone running around to all these places and to all these teachers and all these people, and essentially wanting everyone to tell them they're good, finally. And it's a great process, actually, to have that done sometimes, for someone to just tell you it's okay. You're not this complete disaster as you think you are. But that can only go so far, right? That's an initial layer that can support, and that's why we hold containers for each other, right? But then we naturally have to take that fuel that we gain from those endeavors and the releasing of the fuel that's uncovered by the releasing of those traumas, because that we actually gain a lot of energy. 90% of the population is extremely tired, and they're mainly tired because of all the emotional stress they're carrying. You see, like, tiredness is like the epitome of so much of disease, low energy. Right. So we how do we unlock that energy? We have to come to acknowledge these things by ourselves. We can have people support us, but by our own doing. And in doing so, it unlocks the natural flows of desire that move through us, so that as we engage particular desires, it's not coming through this perpetual lens of self-judgment and condemnation and perfectionism and attempting to see, am I okay? Is it okay for me to entertain this desire? Is it okay for, well, if that's the consideration, it could be valid, in the sense that you could be going overboard, or you're going a bit underboard. It's just recognizing that what's arising is always valid. So we can't deny anything that's arising. But we also have to see through what is valid, because just because something is valid doesn't mean it's true. Like, just because an emotion is arising in a moment and this is how we authentically feel right now, that doesn't mean it's true. It means it's valid, and it's to be validated and potentially seen and expressed, et cetera, et cetera. But it doesn't mean it's true. If every emotion was true in our lives, boy, our lives would be much different than they are. I'm sure we can relate with that. So yeah. So there's a couple comments here. I went on quite a run, so we'll bring it back. Take a look. Okay. I learned the definition last weekend. A synonym of the word duality concept is similar to contrast, themes like black or white, or chaos and divine order, for example. Yeah, nice. Thank you, Corey. I only have 30 minutes this evening. Oh yeah. Okay, awesome. So yeah, so if there's any questions on any of that, or reflections, shares on that, it was quite a long little piece there, but that's what we have today. I love the idea of how to break out of perpetual self cycles. It's the idea that there's no victim, because it's all co-creation. There's no victims because all co-creations. Well, both can simultaneously be true. One thing that's really helpful, we kind of alluded to this in the last session, I believe, where I was basically saying anything that you attempt to crystallize in the mind, see if you can catch it quicker than the time it takes to really solidify, if you get what I mean. Like, when we start crystallizing a certain idea, say we're on a certain belief, and we start thinking about it, we start living it, we start really starting to put energy in it, and then it goes a couple weeks, and then we're really on it. Over a certain period of time, that belief starts to really etch itself. Like, we start to really crystallize that energy, and the longer we wait to really take a look at what's happening there, the more difficult it becomes to release from that belief. So this is the center point of attachment. Right? When we get attached to a specific expectation or a specific ideal, a dogma, a belief, it's because the time period that we gave for it, like we gave attention to it, was essentially the time period it was taking to crystallize, right? Starting to take material form. It becomes, the longer we wait, the more difficult it becomes to essentially dismantle that. So what's important in living a non-dual experience, or living the middle way, because the middle way is essentially synonymous with non-duality, or it's synonymous with an awakened view, is recognizing that the moment we begin to crystallize into something and we start to be aware of it, which is no different than what we've been doing in terms of feeling a charge or sensation and immediately investigating it, we have no interest really in caring about what the topic of crystallization is, or what the topic of the charge or sensation is. We just simply want to repeat the same process again and again on everything. And so in the same way, when we start to investigate a particular belief, it doesn't matter what the belief is. We just start to notice, oh, I'm starting to really believe in this thing a lot. Like I'm really starting to focus a lot of energy in that. It's not that it's wrong or what's happening is wrong or it's bad or not correct or you're doing it wrong. It's that it can immediately start to create a blinder. Because if we believe one thing about something, the opposite is starting to become like untrue for us at the same time, right? Like for instance, if you believe like, only in one political party, like this is the only political party I will ever vote for, this is it, and you start going, even without thinking about the other political parties, immediately you are already crystallizing in your mind that the other political parties are bad, are wrong, are not it, are not true for you. It's inevitable. So with anything that happens, we have to be willing to begin to investigate that in an honest way, to say, okay, I'm enjoying the resonance with this particular direction and this energy and this teaching or this perspective. But I'm simultaneously aware of the tendency to attach into it, to glorify it, to create a dogma out of it. So I'm going to also consider the other flavors of the same thing, so that I can get a well-rounded viewpoint on this topic. And coming back to the first things we went into today, the only way this is actually done is through direct experience. Like there is inevitably going to be an exploration, an actual exploration into that in the real-time, day-to-day life experience. See? So the reason why I went into this thing is because when we talk about the idea and we say, there's no victims because we're all co-creating. Well, that's true, but then it's also true that there's victims. Like if someone gets shot, there's a victim. And I'm not saying that you weren't considering this, right? I think you have a practical common sense reality. But the reason why I'm pointing it out is because just because we say there's no victims doesn't mean that there isn't. There is. There can be simultaneously a victim whilst there not being a sense of victimhood, right? Like if you're in a situation where you're getting abused, or there's a situation where you feel abused, you could say in that moment, okay, there is a victim to abuse, right? It's just a practical description, nothing more, nothing less, practical description. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you feel a sense of victimhood. You understand maybe your responsibility in the dynamic, the karmic implications, the reality of how things just conjure themselves up within co-creation and the forces that are at play, seen and unseen. You understand the wider picture, but we also understand the practical description of what's helpful. And the reason at the core of why I'm sharing this is because we have to be mindful and compassionate to the languaging of our immediate reality, particularly. Right? Because when we come across, so many different types of people each day, not everyone understands this, not everyone sees this way, and not everyone will take it the same way when we voice things in particular, descriptions or ways of explaining things. And so it's a very, it's an important lesson because this actually makes us far more adept, right, in our impact, in our practical ways of service, where because that could be a very dangerous teaching. If someone is spewing out this idea, oh, there's no victims, we're all just co-creating, everyone's responsible for their experience. Yeah, sure, but then go say that to someone who's in the midst of it, or even say that to yourself when you're in the midst of it. Would you even want to hear that? You know what I mean? So we can simultaneously be with it all, and we can see it all, and we can acknowledge it all at the same time. And that does not at all limit our attainment, right? Or the truth that we know, right? It's kind of like people in the new age of law of attraction. They think, oh, if I think one negative thought, disaster is going to happen, something like this. If we don't We've talked about this type of group, we're well beyond this, I would assume, on some level. And maybe even not, maybe we need to humble ourselves to it, but like, disregarding the evil, thinking that somehow is going to solve the issue. It's like, of course not. Actually, the greatest example of the adepthood that you've come to is the willingness to stare right at whatever is appearing as dark, and feel all that you feel, and remain, as equanimous as you can, let's say. Right? And that's very much what we've discussed from the moment we started today about all these world happenings, and yet we haven't really had to address any specific world happening, and yet we're doing so much work with all of them just by discussing what we are discussing, just by sharing this energy, right? Because it's not that we're ignoring it, but we're also not wallowing in it. And to your point, Lily, there's not a victimhood around it. Right? So it's so important that we have come to that resolution within our own being, because then, for instance, if we're in a situation where there's clearly someone who feels victimized or feels as a victim or is experiencing something of the sort, we don't really have to tell them anything about the fact that they're not a victim, because we've resolved it within our own being. Right? So we could just simply be there to show them the way, without potentially even having to say a word about it. Just demonstrating the true ways of compassion and clarity and all that. And it's not always perfect, right? And sometimes it is very important to explain something, if someone is willing and open, and if that's their preferred way of learning, So I hope that makes sense, but a very good topic. I really like that topic because the time that we're in naturally will reveal a lot of perceived victimhood, right? And victims, legitimate victims, those who are victims of these various catastrophes that are happening. It's so much a practical reality at this time, but it's the energetics behind it, right? It's the energetics behind it. And if there is a willingness to acknowledge our own victimhood and come to balance and come to peace with that, that's how we actually can support someone who is legitimately in a place of suffering and pain, right? Without needing to give them some spiritual teaching, or something like this. Right? Right? Because the spiritual teaching will be your service, the actual demonstration. So great, great topic. If there's anything else, questions or things that want to be explored, there's something on YouTube here. It's so difficult for me to stay inside of the system or the matrix. Nothing makes sense, but at the same time, everything makes sense. If that makes sense. I feel like I'm losing my mind and going crazy. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we've all experienced that on some level, right? As you are. Confusion, feeling going crazy, mental, like seemingly diagnosing ourselves with mental illness or something like this. If we go on, I don't know, on a Google search, we're like, oh, I have all those symptoms right now. And so we can address a couple of these points one by one. The first one is very much kind of what we talked about initially today. So if you came in late, I'd recommend rewatching this. But we engaged this topic of perceived ideas in the mind, conceptual ideas of the mind, of the world. Let's just put it that way, just of the world. The new world, the old world, the apocalypse, the liberation, the ascension, the ascension, the great enlightenment, all of these ideas. And they're very much that, they're ideas. And although all ideas can be pointers, they point at things, they point at potentials, because all energy that is unmanifested, which is everything other than now, is energy that is a potential. So yes, there's a potential for all of these ideas, and the energy you give to all of those ideas is influencing and co-creating on some level the actual revealing and or formulation, materialization of that potential. So when we're speaking to the idea of, let's say specifically, I find it difficult to stay inside the system or the matrix. Well, what is this actually? Like, what are we actually saying here specifically? It's kind of like in the conspiracy world when Like the term they is used perpetually. Like they are doing this and they are setting and they want this to happen. And who are we actually speaking about? Because if we're not specific, we think like Susie down the road who works for the government of Canada, in her little cubicle is in on the whole thing. You know what I mean? Like she's in on this great Illuminati operation, right? Or whatever, right? Whatever other example. And that's obviously extreme. I would hope most of us don't assume this, but when we're too generalized, we start to blanket a bunch of things together. And it's actually just a lazy attempt at coming into wisdom. It's not experiencing directly through your direct experience, or at least like like giving more time to that direct experience. It's kind of just like a generalized, lazy blanket statement. And so it can be similarly referenced when we talk about the matrix, because when we think of the matrix, we often would assume, okay, it's this entire global system that's been created by a specific group of families, let's say, that has been connected to other off-planet race lines and has a multi-million year history, et cetera, et cetera. But let's say just in the immediate few thousand years of our history, we have this system that's been fabricated through specific falsified or malevolent intentions. And those intentions, like a virus, have infiltrated many more intentions and many more creations and many more organizations and corporations and systems and governmental bodies and frameworks on how essentially every aspect of our society functions. So we can say, okay, this is being more specific. But then when we really actually zoom in a little bit more, we start to see that, well, wait a minute, this original virus, although it's been infiltrated in all these different ways, a virus is not necessarily just like a top-down influence where, like for instance, if our whole body is diseased, it's not like we heal the whole body simultaneously. On some level, yes, but there's certain focuses that we can take, or there's certain pockets that could be healthier than others. There could be other areas of the body that are thriving where others are not. Like it's a whole complete organism. So when we look at this matrix per se, well, first we can acknowledge that it's not just the bloodlines of these families that work within the fabric of this organizational framework. There's many humans, there's many angelic humans, there's many beings that are of benevolent nature that work within every stage and level of this so-called system and framework, right? So when we come to see that, immediately there's an opening of compassion that starts to emerge, that we start to say, oh, wait a minute, it's not so black or white, because just because the system means I got to go to the bank and talk to the teller and take out some money, and I got to use this money, and I shouldn't have to use money, we should all be, every person that you interact with on that journey, and the people that you may have made or received money from, or the money that you may have given, that may have done great things, and you may have felt great emotions when you received that money from a job well done. You may have had a great interaction with that teller at the bank, and then when you went to the grocery store and she sold you, a bunch of organic stuff, but maybe there's a bit of GMO stuff in there, So you can see already, as we keep dialing in, there's far more complexity to the conversation than just, oh, I don't want to exist within the system or the matrix. That doesn't actually really have that much value to you, right? For it to hold that much weight in your mind, like for it to cause any stress to you, we have to really start to come into this and get more detailed and see, wait a minute, this thing just hovering in my mind, perpetuated by all the newly awakened people that think, oh, we got to take the red pill and exit the matrix and all these kind of fanciful imagination ideas. It comes with good intention. It obviously comes from a true place, like at the core, right? A pure intention that, yes, there's something up, there's something fundamentally wrong with aspects of the way in which things function in our individual life, in our familial life, in our town, community, city, country, globe, solar system, whole damn time matrix. I mean, when we really extend the structures of what we're really talking about when we talk about matrix, well, we're living in an entire time matrix, not as a malevolent terminology, but in this time matrix, we are certainly living in one that's had a lot of dark history. So the idea that we're somehow just going to remove ourselves and free ourselves from this. Yeah, sure, if you somehow free yourself from the money, or you go off grid, or that, maybe that's an initial step, but that's really nothing in the grand scheme of how vast this so-called malevolent matrix has been. And I say has been because it's very much changing. So I hope we're getting somewhere with this form of explanation, and I'm sure you may have considered it somehow in this way before, some of you, and maybe you, Maureen, who asked the question, but I hope it gives a deeper context, because when we keep zooming into things exactly in the same way that we have done the endless amounts of investigative processes in this class on Wednesdays for the past how many years, right? Where we're investigating sensation, and we're going into one fractal, and we're going deeper into another fractal, and another fractal, and we're going deeper and deeper and deeper in the investigation, the honest investigation. Because when we really take a look at all this, and then we come to recognize, as I'm saying, if the idea that you're in the matrix is giving you any form of suffering, well, that most definitely needs to be, or can be, you can choose for it to be investigated and uprooted and dissolved, so it's no longer creating at least the same suffering that it may be, as I see it so much, within the traditional community of awakening fellows and fellas and all of the above. This kind of idea that, oh yes, we live in a matrix and we have to escape it. Yeah, it has some truth, but we have to get very practical with this and understand that, coming back to the same teaching of engaged detachment, we can live in the world but not of it, or we can live invested into all the emotions and all the things and all the happenings, and yet feel completely unscathed and free from it simultaneously, knowing our eternal nature, knowing we are from eternal co-creation, we will always be of that, and no amount of fallen universe or fallen planet or fallen country or fallen whatever can thwart that. That's the reality. That's the truth. And so yeah, so I hope that provides some context and some clarity there. Obviously it comes with a lot of responsibility to actually start to honestly investigate and look at what is present, what is here, what are we actually holding that's causing suffering for no real good reason. Right? Like, when we hold these ideas that just eat away at us, right? But this is part of the journey, like I remember in 2011, I went through initial phases of rejecting the matrix and wanting to run away and rebel and all these things, and then it takes a long time to really, because you're really just moving through anger, you're moving through rage, you're moving through frustration, you're moving through sadness, you're moving through all of these emotions that arise that are fundamentally valid, in how we relate with the world. But when we start to really come to peace and resolve the energies within our being, we see that there's nothing really in the world that's of an issue. The money's not an issue, the banking system, transportation system, the food system, the medical world, the education, like all these, there's nothing inherently wrong with any of those systems. They can be improved. Oh, who would have thought? I feel like we could probably improve ourselves a little bit too, right? So it can all be improved, surely. It can all be transformed. It is improving. It is constantly transforming. It's constantly evolving. Everything is. Maybe not at the pace of our impatience, but certainly is. So we can be free within it all. We can engage it all. We can have fun with it all, if that's the desire. If you have the desire to go and do something within the matrix, but the mind or the belief says, no, I can't do that, that's matrix living, or that's unconscious, or that's this or that. I mean, yeah, within warrants, right? We have to draw the line as what is unrighteous and righteous, and we've identified that very clearly today, as we have many times, in terms of resolving the principles that govern our behavior. But it's not the thing. That's the point I was making at the beginning of today. The desire itself is not the issue. It's the way it's approached, the way it's engaged. It's the way we handle that energy. It's the way we handle that desire and navigate and direct that energy, direct that money, direct that small talk with so-and-so, right? Direct our dealings with government and organizations and all the contracts we may be engaged in that we think are the issue, but really it's what are we bringing to the table and how are we bringing it to the table? How are we engaging with all of these dynamics? You see? So yeah, peace is it. Compassion. Yeah, you're welcome, Lily. Be the observer. Exactly. Yeah. So another great topic. Very relevant, especially now. And what I had missed previously when I was saying, more than a decade ago was when I went through kind of an initial opening on these kind of topics. But past 2-3 years, so many more people than I've ever seen before coming through these initial phases, and it just reminded me of those phases that we go through that is filled a lot of that anger. You see it on social media a lot. All of us, we've all been guilty. When we're sharing something that's not right in the world, we feel that anger, but we have to feel that anger, not let it develop an attitude, right? Not let it develop a way of being, because if we get too lost in that, it can be extremely daunting. It holds a weight. It holds a weight that's just not so fun, right? But who said this journey is all about fun? It can be, but we have to be humble. So yeah, we haven't done any just sitting with all that, and I don't feel called to lead anything too much right now. I just feel like we're just going to sit in all this, and so maybe I'll guide it a little bit, just set the container, and then I'll leave it open for some more questions or comments and shares afterwards, after a little break here, a little meditation, little observation, and then we'll close it up. So yeah, nothing too special. But we can close the eyes if we feel we'd like to, and just just come to rest in what this is and what's here and what's available for us to take a look at. Simply resting in the silence, and of course we may feel particular sensations within our being and other relevant topics of all of the above, but really just kind of letting it all naturally rise and fall. Nothing needs to be anywhere or anything. It doesn't need to look like anything. We can basically drop all the ideas we have about even just this simple meditation, what it needs to look like, how we are supposed to feel or supposed to be thinking, or what we're supposed to be focused on. All of that all can just be left alone. Everything can be left alone. And yet we're right there with it all. And we can just feel that relaxation of that kind of leaving things alone vibe, where nothing is too much of any concern. We can release from any of the tension in the physical body that may be lingering when we do feel that way, or we are kind of really overly focused on something, or concerned in some way, or attached to some outcome or expectation. And simply feeling that expansiveness in every direction, that ease, that grace, that compassion. It's like it's filling up the spaciousness, whatever spaciousness. Not that the spaciousness is within any particular container, but we just simply feel the essence of our being extending everywhere and into everything. Just this super simple peace, super simple ease and equanimity. It's synonymous with a certain okayness with everything. It's not that everything is perfect or everything is feeling perfect or perceived as perfect. There's just simply an okayness with that. Instead of shooting for perfection, why don't we just start with okay? Everything is simply okay. It's okay how this is, how that is, how this is, how that is. However, whatever is here is, it's just okay. That's it. So we can almost instantly feel the relief that comes with that, a weight off the shoulders of anything needing to look and in any particular way, and releasing from just the overall essentially weight that may be put on the shoulders, that we're somehow responsible all the time for every single thing that looks like every single way. Not that we're not, but we can still walk around without the weight on the shoulders. So some of us may feel naturally complete here, and obviously this meditation is just an extension and a little bit of a more of a silent break, even though we're still hearing my rambling. But we can continue in that space, or if there's questions or further comments or things that want to be explored, then we can explore them. There's a message here. What if I feel a call? Like there's something else I should be doing, but I'm confused if it's my ego trying to escape or my true self being awake. Well, another term I like to use is a feeling of resonance, right? If we feel a resonance with something, like an inkling, an intuition, a direction. Pointer. A pointer is probably the least charged of all those terms, because even resonance can come with a lot of baggage. A pointer is just simply, oh yeah, like let me explore that. It doesn't mean I gotta go all in and do everything about what that is. That's just another form of attempting to find God in whatever you're objectifying, which is the epitome of the seeking illusion. So it's more, oh, I'd like to explore that a little bit. So we explored a little bit. Right? Like if you're, I don't know, walking down the street and you see this store and you feel like, I want to go in there. It's usually not too complex. It's like, I'm just going to go in. And then you go in and then maybe there's something there. Maybe not. And regardless, you went in, you explored, And maybe there's all these things that open up, and then maybe you just walk right out. So that could happen a bunch of more times on that same walk, right? So it's like recognizing that it's, again, not this black or white, all in, all out. I got to do this, I got to do that. That's the egoic escape. When you say, I'm feeling a call towards something, and I'm not sure if it's my ego looking to escape. Well, if it's in your mind that thinks, if I go and do that exact thing, it's going to solve all of what's here, well, that's something to investigate. That's something that could be something to look at, right? But if it's coming from this place of, yeah, let me explore that, let me try it out, then we can clearly see that whether you engage it or not, whether it works out or not, whether it's all that or all not, or a little bit of it, a little bit not, it's not really changing that much. Because we recognize that we are the ones exactly where we are now to reveal the peace in which we're seeking is already here. The love, the joyfulness, all of that is already available to us through our own direction of energy and our directing of energy, or our less is more attitude, like the releasing. It's simultaneously a focusing as it is a releasing. So in that process of us acknowledging that we are the ones that can elicit, like if we just bring in the mind the thought of compassion, we feel instantly a feeling of subtle compassion. If we bring in the mind the feeling of patience, we instantly feel a subtle sense of patience. All of this element of recognizing we are the ones to activate these energies makes us understand that there's no thing over there or behind the mountain or under there or whatever that's going to reveal this for us. We have to be the ones to reveal it for our own being. And from that place, then yes, certainly, again, we're going to be already feeling okay, right? We're already going to be feeling, somewhat a sense of balance. And then in exploring that, we're not attached to whether that works out or not. We're just, okay, let me explore that. And then as we explore it, we see, oh yeah, that's great. It's really fun. I'm going to keep doing it. Or we also see, no, it's not it. And then we move on. So it can simultaneously be both, where there could be something very beautiful and true for you to explore in going to that town or talking to that person or engaging this project or moving in a certain direction or saying a certain thing. And it also can be a sense of feeling you need to escape this moment, or you're bored, or there's something else going on. So if we're honest about it, at least this is the step one, just be honest about what's happening. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like we need to be in perfect peace before we take a trip, or we need to be in perfect peace before we engage a relationship again, or this, that, and the other. It's just simply an exploration and giving us some room to breathe. One way that the room to breathe is sometimes not there is when the lower chakras are really having some trouble. And in those lower chakras having some trouble, we have survival fears, we have sexual energy distortions, we have feelings of lack of safety no matter where we are. Just in our own body, we feel insecure. So when those things are present, yeah, we're going to be really cognizant about every choice we make, because we think on some level unconsciously it's life or death. Can you see how transformative that can be to reveal that, to reveal what's going on there within the traumatic wall, the miasms, the energetic blocks that could be, residing in those lower areas, right? So it's that's something that's quite good to look at. So we have this person has a very paradoxical comment on the YouTube. First comment, amen. Second comment, Satan is going to wake up, be prepared. All right. So yeah, hopefully that helps a little bit more. Yeah, if there's any other questions or comments, then feel free. I'm going to put some links here for those who want to contribute for today. so I don't forget. It's not like I forget often, but sometimes I do. And yeah, I'll leave it open if there's any more questions or anything, but probably wrap it up soon. Really great great session. Great session. I'd like to do these more. I'm feeling of a change of certain things soon. I don't know what the changes will be. I think for one, I'd like to get a better camera. It's gonna be the first one, a better webcam. We'll probably start doing these in person potentially some sort of day experience, something. You know, I obviously do a lot of like ecstatic dance, live events, and these different sound experiences, but you know, really the bread and butter here is you know, in these core teachings. Okay, a few different topics that are coming up. So this will be the last round of questions that I'll get. Thank you, Corey, for the acceptance, compassion, wisdom, and also the messages of eternity. Thank you. Oh, you're welcome. Amy is asking, when you explore boredom, what is your experience? Boredom often comes with a lack of challenge. If things get too comfortable or there's no real challenge, like, you know, something to kind of get our energy focused into, I don't know, maybe we want to do a new craft, or we want to create some music, or we'd like to build something for our home or something, like it may require a bit of a learning curve, a little bit of a challenge, or something to engage our mind and our brain and our energy and all that into. That's often where boredom, you know, can come from. So we look for excitement in little pulses of things, whether it's social media or I don't know, some spicy food maybe, or sex, or interactions, or all kinds of things. Boredom can obviously happen with people too. You know, you can be with other people and still feel bored. But often when there's a real true experience of intimacy with ourselves, primarily at the forefront, but also with all selves, because ourselves is extended, this is often the creative impulse, right? Anyone who's ever jammed with a group of people, right, or made some music, or did some art together, or worked on a project, or worked on a task, or something in the neighborhood, I don't know, a business, even in an employee setting, having a project that you feel inspired to work on together, or engage. The creative process and the movement of creative energy is the most fulfilling thing we can engage in the human experience, and with other people is even more fulfilling often. And so we have to essentially look to cultivate that within our own intimate ways. So that could be just taking up a new hobby. Like, you know, I've been personally really into the music thing for the first time in many years, like really in depth in the production side of things. There's so many new things I'm having to humble myself to learn the most basic of things. You know, I've gone into the most advanced topics in spirituality, and now I'm in music, and I'm so humbled to the most simple things. Like I don't even really know the notes per se, and yet, you know, still making some really beautiful music. So it's just so funny that we can constantly be humbled and challenged no matter where we are on the path. And that's really the core essence to dealing with boredom. The other thing is that boredom sometimes is a feeling of stagnation in the body. So even just getting up and moving, taking a shower, going for a walk, you know, I don't know, whatever, that can get the energies moving. We want to be moving. We want to be keeping the energies moving, because when we're not, that's when the stagnation occurs, and that's when the boredom can be created. And you know, we're coming into the winter months, so we're more susceptible to this, because it's more easy to just stay at home, you know, and that can be fine too. We don't have to be bored while we're at home within the winter. It's setting ourselves up for success. So creating spaces where we can create, you know, and I'm specifically talking about like creative endeavors. It could be music, could be art, could be writing, could be videos, it could be singing, it could be body movement, you know, learning a martial art, learning a new form of yoga. It could be anything, but something that engages you, you know, and crafts, woodwork. I mean, the list goes on, obviously, and we all have our own interests. So I'm not going to get into that too much, but yeah, hopefully that is it. So, you know, in the next time that we feel a sense of boredom, it's a beautiful process to really investigate that and see, well, you know, oh, I'm just not moving my energy. I'm not challenging myself. I'm not engaging in something I can grow into, you know, where I can learn something from the base level. Right. It requires humility to do that, because almost every moment the ego is trying to say, oh, you've mastered this now. Oh, you're at this level now. Oh, you're at this stage now. You never need to go back. It's not true. Just not true. So yeah, very helpful. Yeah, you're welcome. The beautiful thing about focusing on the kind of vertical topic of awakening, spiritual growth, or these kind of interchangeable terms, is that expansion of consciousness makes us more adept in everything. Not necessarily that we are adept in everything, like, because if we haven't done something before, just to think we're just immediately adept because we've come to some level of awakening, that's not true. But what can be true is that we can very easily learn things. The learning gap is much quicker. Why? Because the self-doubt lens starts to dissolve, if not be dissolved. The self-judgment, the egoic self that wants to manipulate and control the learning process, right? Like I said, I don't even really know the notes in music, and yet we're still about to release some really nice music, that I think is great. I mean, people have given some decent feedback, so that'll be coming soon. And I still don't really even know the notes. So from an egoic lens, I could be like, well, you don't even know the notes. Who are you to make some music? How are you to create these things? Oh, this and that, right? But we all learn differently, and we all experience things differently. And just because we may not intellectually know the cream of the crop of all these, yes, or this, that, and the other, doesn't mean we're not able or capable of learning or discovering or creating, because most of what we create is subconscious anyways. So we have to trust in the process of creativity, and that's very daunting for the mind, right? To just trust in the creative process, like just to get a blank canvas, a white canvas, and get some paintbrushes and just start painting something. You don't have no idea what you're painting. Just start moving the brushes and start doing whatever intuitively comes. This is the type of creativity that I'm pointing to. Although structured creativity is very helpful too, and I view both of them to be important and useful, right? But yeah, as a long-winded answer to boredom. Christina, Tara, thanks a lot. Yeah, you're welcome. Is this live every Wednesday? Not at the moment, but we're getting more consistent again, so it seems so. Just stay tuned on YouTube, or Instagram is usually where I announce a lot of it. Lavani, could you talk more about manifestation? Well, we've had some great talks about it. I would point you back to seeing if you watched that video I sent you. I have a really good, actually, it's not linked on YouTube. It's a private, it's a part of an actual video course, which I've linked to Lavani, but most people here have maybe not seen it. Some of you may have. It was quite a while ago. It was a specific workshop I did on manifestation, and a specific technique of manifestation, of how to focus our energy and intention on manifesting specific things. But the equation that I've given people before, and that we've talked about, Lavani, is concentration times the energy of our intention, or the intensity of our focus, and then the accumulation of our energy is going to equal the result of the manifestation. And often people could resolve or equate that the intensity of that energy is equivalent to the intensity of gratitude or appreciation, right? But it's not just that. It's more specifically a source energy, right? Like the pure potential energy that comes as a wave of joyfulness, bliss, appreciation, love, compassion. There's many forms of it, and it's all really just this one energy. But it's the intensity of that energy that we've cultivated within our being that we then concentrate and focalize on a particular, in a particular direction. That is going to amplify the speed and efficiency of manifestation. It's a very simple formula. It's a very difficult thing to do. But the funny thing is, and the paradoxical thing is, although it's difficult to focus on one particular thought at a particular time, it's not necessarily difficult to manifest, because we're doing it all the time anyways. We've been doing it since the beginning of time. We've been co-creating, and everything we have in our life right now has been co-created by us in some form. We have manifested all of it in some way. We have contributed to what's here. So in that sense, we are master manifestors. It's just simply, have we developed the concentration to focus the intention upon the desired outcome? That's the real question. So it's not so much a question, can we manifest or how do we manifest? We already are doing that all the time. It's more, are we concentrated? Are we clear? Are we honest about what the true desire is or the true direction? Those are more so the more important elements to take a look at, because if that's the case, where we are honest, we are clear, we are focused, we really feel in a certain direction, then we can explore that. Now, the funny thing is, the paradox with it all is, as we come to that level of clarity and concentration and focus and all that, our desire to focus on solely material things or the appearance of things diminishes. We are more focused on the energy behind things, right? Like the energy behind a relationship or behind an environment or behind a specific a thing and how it makes us feel. So that could be a piece of clothing that makes us feel great, and we're like, yeah, I want that. Or it could be a certain person that we feel great around them and we'd like to pursue that. It could be a particular, other, whatever, a house, a car, whatever. It could be anything that it creates a certain energy within us that we're like, yes, I'd like to create more of that feeling within my being and within my life as a whole. And this represents that in some way. I feel activated by it. It activates this joyful flow in me. So I'm going to engage that. So in that sense, all desire, as long as it's of a Christic virtue, in the sense that it's not harming other beings and it's in alignment with our virtues in the way we look to, manifest that particular thing, or the way we go about creating that result, then there's no issue with it at all. It's a further activation, and that's why we can't be in any judgmental view of each other on what it is that we each desire, right? We have to be honest about the fact that often our judgments of other people's desires is the repression of our own. So yeah, hopefully that helps. Obviously we'll get into it more, Lavani, when we chat next. But for those who want to dive deeper into the manifestation topic, you can message me and I can teach you some of these things, or I can send you some of the old videos, workshops, right? I mean, my primary focus obviously is in the manifestation. It's still a manifestation, but the manifestation of peace. Foundational peace is my core intention in my interactions with others. I mean, there's far better, money gurus or manifest car gurus, or I don't know, get your perfect partner gurus. I mean, they're everywhere, right? So we can go to them if we want to get those things, I guess. But I don't consider myself a guru. I consider myself just someone sharing a direction of peace. And to me, that's the fundamental desire of all desire. It's this peace, it's this love, it's this compassion. And in coming to this, we may certainly, of course, want to engage all kinds of material things, and that's completely okay, but at least it's on a different foundation, or at least it deepens into that foundation. And because of that, we just get far more efficient. Because put it this way, let's say that we think that if we get this and that, it's going to equal peace. But then we find the direct path to peace that's already here, and we realize all those steps for peace are actually so inefficient, because I already can actually access it right here and now. So let me do that, right? Or at least let me attempt it. And the funny thing about desire and the karmic movements of desire is we likely still will engage those steps too, because those may be of resonance and a natural karmic unfolding of our path. Nothing wrong with those things, but we understand that they're not going to bring us to the end of the rainbow. They're just stages upon an eternal path. So we're not demeaning or repressing those desires. We're just recognizing what they are. And that's the core of the entirety of essentially this, what we talked about today. And, much of the path as a whole is nothing in particular is the issue, right? There's no one particular thing that is the ultimate issue. It's just simply an aspect to the path that has to be further investigated, right? There's nothing inherently wrong with specific objects that we're observing, or specific desires, or things of that sort. I mean, within reason, right? We're obviously getting into a more advanced discussion here, so we're not necessarily always addressing the ethical and moral elements, although we went into it a lot today. But that's an element that we can't deny. But it's also not something we need to talk about all the time, because if we cultivate at least a foundation to that, then we're at least level-headed that we're not desiring certain things that are just unrighteous or misaligned. But that that's besides the point. So yeah, great. Your music is great. Wonderful. Thank you. We have some new releases coming soon. We're in the final processes. Music production has taught me a lot about a lot of things and the meticulous nature. And the funny thing is I'm kind of in a similar stage overall in my journey where, I have probably close to at least 400,000 plus words of written material, but let's say maybe half or 3/4 of that as things that could potentially be released in the form of books. I have countless unreleased songs. I have so much video content of stuff that I think, can very much support many more people, but seen by, very few in the grand scheme. So I'm kind of in this similar phase right now of all these things kind of slowly starting to come to the surface and make their way where they are to go, I guess. So it's a fun process. I'll say that it's very fun. And yeah. Lily, do I have a SoundCloud? I do have a SoundCloud. It's just all my mixes from YouTube there, but that'll be really amped up over the next little while with all this new music coming, new music and new mixes. Yeah, I'm gonna take a look at that. But if you look for Infinite Chic or whatever, I don't have the link right now. Maybe I can find it. Yeah, it's good to follow me there too. I'll link it. Yeah, so yeah, we're going, it's about 9 o'clock now, so an hour and a half. Couple of things I want to just announce in this concept of coming out, or coming out of the closet, but we're coming out of the monk cave, that's for sure. The first things first is, if you haven't engaged the numerous courses on the Gumroad platform, I would highly recommend doing so. There's so much value there, and when I'm talking about a lot of like old material that is hidden in these hour and a half long things that I know a lot of people don't want to go through maybe the whole thing, so maybe we need more timestamps and stuff, but there's a lot of really beautiful material in the Gumroad platform, of all those courses, and they're really accessible in terms of price points. I mean, I don't know, I've seen some of the prices of some other people's stuff these days, and I have no judgments about it other than, it's just mind-boggling sometimes. And I want to keep it as accessible as possible while also respecting the value of it all. So what I'm going to be looking to launch actually is a membership system where people are getting access to everything at the same time for a pretty accessible price. And hopefully that elicits more people to engage, for one, and specifically engage the content. But I did mention that we're going to go into like more of a focused period for what I call like internal non-duality, which is essentially these sessions. And I'm in a bit of a crossroads on some level, because I like doing these sessions. I mean, they're mainly donation based. Obviously, I'm not making much money from these types of sessions, but I really enjoy having them out. I feel like these teachings should be accessible to everybody. But at the same time, I also honor the power and impactful nature of a compressed group or a more of a closed group container. So we're probably going to be doing something like this simultaneously in the coming month, where we're having like a focus group that's really zoned in on these core topics, and we can create the container for that. Because I still feel the energy of like being on a street corner when I'm on YouTube or live, because we are streaming on YouTube live as much as we're on Zoom. And it's why, yeah, I've just I am finding a balance with it all, because I mean, I haven't been quiet over the years in terms of lives. I've done many of them, but over the past year specifically, I've really just changed my outlook on some of those elements, and just balanced things out a little bit more. So I'm not going to ramble too much more. All I'm saying is that there's a new group course coming up that will be more focused on a lot of the things we go into in these sessions. Obviously, we have the detoxification stuff that can always be discussed. We have the emotional healing that's essentially a part of it. But when we get into some of the more advanced topics, those things aren't as covered as more because they just don't need to be. But they're still relevant. So that's why we've leveled 1, 2, and 3, and the 3 is going to be this next unfolding for that very specific purpose. So for those that are interested or want to really get engaged in that, then send me a message personally, and I'll take note of it and get you more of those details. And likewise with one-on-one time, a lot of you I do spend one-on-one time with, or I have, but that's there, and it can be very impactful. The group is impactful too, but sometimes we want to get into things very specifically. So that's my ramble, as a final ramble. And unless there's another question, I'm just gonna double check. Excited for the membership. Cool. Yeah. Hey, Taylor. Great. Well, I feel that's good. I really enjoyed today, as I do every week. But some really cool, it's always cool. It's always endless new topics. And that's why I don't even attempt to market these. That's probably the issue. Why we have these under 10 groups, which I really appreciate all of you, but it's just funny to me, like what we're the stuff we're talking about, and yeah, some more communication on specific topics will probably be helpful for people to want to come to these. But spread the word, share these as best you can, subscribe, like, all the above. I feel good with this. Deep love to each of you. I hope your night or your day or whatever is wonderful. And if you're coming in late and you didn't watch this, it'll be up on YouTube. You can go watch it. And donations are appreciated. Much love. See y'all soon. And peace out.